What's up, everybody? It's Bucky Brooks, and this is the Bucky Brooks Show. I am coming to you from Indianapolis, the site of the 2025 NFL Combine. And what we want to do today is talk about all things that have been going on with the Combine. So we'll touch on some of the performances that have taken place to this point, but really all the buzz and the news that has really taken place. From Matthew Stafford to Deebo Samuel to news that we're getting on Sam Darnold and such. We'll talk about some of those things and some of the newsier items as it relates to the 2025 draft class, including the dilemma that James Pearce is going to create in meeting rooms across the league. But before we get to that, let's talk about our sponsor, Bet Online, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for online betting in 2025. Whether you're a seasoned fan or a first-time bettor, Bet Online is your ultimate game day companion. With the largest selection of odds on everything from NBA and college basketball to NHL and UFC, Bet Online continues to be your number one sports betting source. From every three-pointer to hat trick, Bet Online has you covered with odds, stats, and more for every game, every play, and every win. Bet Online, the game starts here. Guys, it's been a fascinating week up at the combine, and it always is. Like, this is kind of like football heaven in a way. It is the one time that everyone in football is in one location where everyone can meet, talk, socialize. It's a bit of a convention while also being what it is, the biggest job interview for the 2025 draft class. The event, the combine, is really designed for teams to get background information and medicals on all the players. The on field workouts are a backdrop to that, but that's not the most important part of the event. As a former evaluator, or as a former scout, this is still a big part of it because you do want to see the best guys work out. But we're in changing times where all of the top guys may elect to bypass working out in front of all the scouts, but it still gives you an opportunity to not only meet those guys, but to see some of the other guys that you hadn't had an opportunity to really cast your eyes on since the regular season. And for the coaches, a lot of times the combine is the first time that they are given exposure to the next generation of players that are coming through. They may have seen them on tape, but this is the first time they're able to take the prospects that they've seen on tape and watch them physically up close and in person. And sometimes those first impressions matter more than you would think. Not just how someone physically looks on the hoof, but how they interact when you have your meetings and those things, how they're able to handle themselves in those meetings when it comes to direct conversations about football. All of that stuff goes into the evaluation process. And it's one of the reasons why I love coming here because I love getting the skinny and scoop on what's taking place with the draft. But before we even talk about like the draft, you have to understand the combine is also the place where a lot of things get done before the league year starts. The league year start next week. Free agency will kind of coincide with some of that stuff where you can open up the conversations with agents and those things. So a lot of that groundwork is done here in Indianapolis. Agents talking to general managers and team builders, trying to get everything, their ducks in a row before they make these major moves. That is why we've heard so much news the last few days over some prominent players either being moved or moving, being on the trade market, and those things. The number one story that has really kind of taken over the combine has been Matthew Stafford being given permission to kind of sniff around and see what opportunities are there. He has won a Super Bowl with the LA Rams. He's done some great things with Sean McVay. The Rams certainly have benefited from having a franchise quarterback, a former number one overall pick, join the franchise. But now we're kind of in this funny part of his career where he's entering the twilight of his career, but still playing at a high level. The Rams are trying to figure out, well, how do you put a value on that when you have someone who's still playing well, but the market has skyrocketed, has been ballooned to now we're talking about $50 million annually for elite quarterbacks. The thing about Matthew Stafford is he has a nice setup in LA. When you look at the way that the Rams operate, you look at the synergy between Sean McVay and Matthew Stafford. Hard for me to imagine Matthew Stafford wanting to leave the comfort of that cocoon that he has in LA. I understand the money is certainly a factor, and I understand there are great opportunities out there available for him. We heard about the chance encounter that he had in Montana with Tom Brady, where it wasn't a meeting, but they just happened to bump into each other on the slopes, which I mean, it seems kind of random, but maybe it happened like that. They just happened to be on the same bunny slope and bumped into each other without knowing. But what they did is that created some fodder and some conversation about Matthew Stafford potentially going to Vegas. There's been that conversation out there about Matthew Stafford going to New York, and he certainly would have a robust market if he hit the open market, if he really was available as a trade candidate. The thing Matthew Stafford has to make a decision on is how does he want to finish? What we know about the Rams is the Rams are a contender with Matthew Stafford in the building. Even when they are rebuilding, Sean McVay and that coaching staff do a great job of finding ways to win with a roster that is turning over and becoming younger. Because of that, man, I just find it hard to think that he is going to leave LA with so much positive things going on. And I know the Cooper Kupp situation will impact them. If Cooper moves on, they move on from Cooper. He loses a trusted, confidant, friend, and playmaker. But Puka Nacua has really emerged as their number one receiver. The other thing that you have with LA is a running game that is tough behind a very talented runner in Kyron Williams. You have an offensive line that is continuing to improve as Les Snead and company bring in top players. And you have a defense that is really improving by leaps and bounds with a bunch of young, hungry defenders poised to take another step in the development next year. To me, all those factors kind of point to Matthew Stafford eventually sucking it up, coming back. They find a way to reward him with a deal that has, some triggers that can get him up to the number that he wants or at least close to. And then he's able to kind of successfully help the Rams transition to a new quarterback that will eventually take over in 26, 27 as this team gets ready to move on with life after Matthew Stafford. The other news comes from the same division, Deebo Samuel. Normally, when we hear people with trade requests, we always hear the general manager come to the podium and say, no, he's going to be with our team for life. We believe in him. We love him. We would never want to move on. What was different, John Lynch did not give that sentiment. John Lynch said that, hey, we probably will grant his requests. We will give him an opportunity not only to shop his services, but we'll probably make this trade happen as we're thinking about how we need to rebuild this team. There was a disappointment last year. The thing about Deebo Samuel is, as much as I love what he does as a physical hybrid playmaker, a Swiss Army knife, a guy who is, I think he has like 22 receiving touchdowns, 20 rushing touchdowns, or something like that, 42 total touchdowns. He's not a route runner. And when you look at the issues that the Niners have had in the passing game, particularly in big games, their inability to separate for man coverage. I'm not saying that Deebo can't get open, is not an effective guy against man coverage, but he's certainly not one of those premier route runners that you would talk about with Justin Jefferson and some of those other guys at the top of the charts. That said, the injury factor and the age factor for Deebo Samuel makes him kind of tricky to continue to invest in when he's missed like chunks of time. And for the Niners, they did a little bit of their shopping last year when they went and made some moves, and they were able to get some young players that could go. You have Brandon Ayuk coming back. You have Pretty Ricky on the perimeter that they drafted in the first round coming back. And so they're able to already kind of field a lineup that you can envision them rolling out without Deebo Samuel being in the mix. Juwan Jennings emerging. So that gives them a top three to be able to do it. And when you have to pay Brock Purdy, which that is coming up, you have to find a way to kind of get cheaper at some of these spots. And moving on from Deebo Samuel makes a lot of sense for them. And it also makes a lot of sense for him. When I think about the destinations and the landing spots, to me, the number one spot would be Pittsburgh. And the reason why I can see Deebo Samuel in Pittsburgh is he reminds me a lot of Hines Ward in terms of like the toughness, the physicality, the edge that he brings to the team. When you think about those old Pittsburgh teams and what Hines Ward did, not only as a receiver and a playmaker, but the physicality and blocking and being the toughest guy on the perimeter and how that set the tone for the team, Deebo Samuel certainly can slide into that role. You also talk about the maturity factor that he brings in. This is a team that has had some issues out wide with diva-like receivers not fully conforming and buying into the team. And even though Deebo has some of these issues when it comes to not liking his role at times or when he wanted his contract and even this year asking for the trade, by all accounts, he's a great teammate. He plays well. He does what you need him to do as a team. And I think for Mike Tomlin, it could be very attractive. The other teams that I would keep an eye on, Kansas City Chiefs. And the reason why the Kansas City Chiefs are all when they play after being disappointed in the way that they performed in the Super Bowl and looking at how their offense has kind of reached, I guess, a bit of a stagnant nature. Maybe they want a playmaker that they can kind of get some easy completions to, some yak yards that he can pick up on these crossing routes and bubble screens and those things. I can see Andy Reid having a lot of fun creating things for Deebo Samuel to kind of get off. Last story that has really been buzzing: Sam Darnold, Minnesota Vikings. There was a kind of a presumption for a long time that the Minnesota Vikings would probably move on from Sam Darnold, handed to J.J. McCarthy. They drafted him last year, 10th overall. He is someone that people were excited about, but the injury that he had last year, he hasn't really been able to get any reps on the practice field or anything to really improve and become the young player that they want. To me, as much as people talk about how cost prohibitive it could be to keep Sam Darnold, I believe Kevin O'Connor has to go up there and fight to keep Sam Darnold in the building. The reason why you want to keep Sam Darnold in the building is he played great for you. I mean, this is the best that Sam Darnold has played in his entire career, and he did it in the first year in the system. Given another year in the system, given more chances to learn from Kevin O'Connor, to play with the playmakers around him, why couldn't he take another step in his development? He played at a Pro Bowl level last year. Maybe he plays at another Pro Bowl level and more next year in a very comfortable system that he really knows, as opposed to one that he is learning. You can figure out, like, whether it's the franchise tag, whether it's using the franchise tag as the base number. There is a way where you can keep Sam Darnold in the building. I've advocated for him to stay, even in spite of the way that it finished up those last couple games in the playoffs. To me, Sam Darnold gives the Minnesota Vikings a chance to compete with the top teams in the division, can make another playoff run, and maybe get even farther on their journey this year as he settles in as, even if it's the short-term franchise quarter, but as the franchise quarterback in Minnesota. Look for Sam Darnold to stay in purple. It just makes too much sense to do it. Now let's talk about some draft news. And this is something that was big because what it does is it affects the top of the draft board. Abdul Carter having a stress fracture in his foot, one that could require surgery, even though his representatives have said that he's going to elect not to have surgery. But that changes a lot at the top of the board when it comes to the Tennessee Titans. The Tennessee Titans were tasked with, I would say, a very, very tough question. Do we take the top quarterback, the franchise quarterback that we desperately need, or do we take the best player available, who some would deem to be a transcendent talent, a generational talent, in Abdul Carter? The injury to the foot makes it harder for Carter to be in that conversation, number one, overall, because there's more uncertainty about him and how he'll bounce back from that. Even though everyone and all doctors will say, oh, he'll be back to new, he'll be new and improved, all of those things, there's a risk associated with drafting someone that is injured at the top of the board. That might lead Brian Callahan and the front office staff to say, hey, maybe we need to slow down and really take a look at these quarterbacks and figure out which one is the right one for us. Shedeur Sanders, the polished pocket passer, the guy who Brian Callahan compared to Joe Burrow in terms of the way that he operates from the pocket, touch, timing, anticipation, the ability to fit balls into tight windows by letting it go early and allowing his guys to run into those open areas. All of that is really, really good. And you love seeing that, hearing that, the comparisons between Callahan and Sanders. And to me, it makes sense. When I watch him play from the pocket, he is far more polished as a player than Cam Ward. The thing with Cam Ward, though, is you get a very toolsy player, a guy who has kind of pulled himself up from his bootstraps, going from Incarnate Word to Washington State to Miami, displaying great leadership and winning intangibles in all of those areas, with all those situations, because he helped each of those programs turn around. And a lot of it was due to his playmaking and his performance and his ability to push his teammates to another level. You're the Tennessee Titans and you've struggled, and people can talk about the situation with Will Levis and Mason Rudolph, if any of those guys are salvageable. I just know when I look at this team does not have a franchise quarterback. And if you are close enough to getting one, you have to hand the card in. So this conversation will be fascinating. Don't expect anybody else to be in the mix. If Abdul Carter is not up there, it now comes down to Shedeur Sanders and Cam Ward for the Tennessee Titans. as we're talking about the number one overall pick. And it's interesting that we're talking about the debate Sanders and Ward over who is the best quarterback. There's an interesting debate about Travis Hunter being the best player in the draft. Travis Hunter, Heisman Trophy winner, Biletnikoff Award winner, is listed as a DB when he comes through to the combine, but he's been ranked as a top receiver for some other teams who are intrigued by his playmaking ability, his hand-eye coordination, his raw receiving skills, but his impressive tools. Makes it like really, really difficult to figure out what we're going to do with him. People are talking about him being a unicorn. I'm not ready to say he's a unicorn, that we haven't seen the likes of him before. I would say that he's just different because he fully immersed himself into two-way life in Colorado. He's always been a two-way player going all the way back to high school. He impacts the game when he touches the ball. He's an impact player on the perimeter as a defender because he can make plays, he can intercept it, he'll tackle, all of those things, feisty competitor, all of that. But when I look at him and I think about the future of the league, I just know 6 foot, 185 pounds, hard to find at corner, dime a dozen at wide receiver. His instincts, awareness, ball skills, hard to find at corner, see it all the time at wide receiver. To me, he is an easy pick because you're getting 2 for 1. You know you're getting a dynamic playmaker on defense. You have a really good feel for what he can give you on offense and packages and those things. And even if you added the return game, which he said, I already have 2 jobs, I don't need another one. But even if you added him in the return game, he gives you another scary playmaker to deal with. To me, the Travis Hunter evaluation is an easy one. It's a matter of, does he fit the scheme that you run? He played a lot of man-to-man coverage at Colorado, but I still view him as more of a zone-based corner, partially because I want him to have his eyes on the quarterback so he can really tally a bunch of interceptions off tips and overthrows in his area. If that happens, man, it's lights out. Look, I think he's a top 5 talent. Latest mock draft, I had him at number 5 going to the Jacksonville Jaguars. But even if he doesn't go 5, he is going in that alley. We can talk about somewhere 4 to 8, 9. He's coming off the board because he's that good. And look, deservedly so. He is a talented prospect. And I am with them talking about playing both ways. I would do it a little differently. Start at defense, package play on offense, let him get some opportunities to impact the game, but don't wear him out by giving him too many reps. Final thing as it comes to the pros, Russell Wilson. Russell Wilson, surprisingly, will be highly sought after on the free agent market. When you think about the money that he played for last year in Pittsburgh, 1.2, even though it was offset by the mega deal that he signed that guaranteed $124 million to him when he elected to go with the Browns. The $39 million that he earned last year, he won't see again. So now Russell Wilson has an opportunity to take a page from Baker Mayfield and reset, reestablish, and rebrand himself either in Pittsburgh or with another team. And as bad as we talk about the Steelers offense, Russell was solid as a quarterback. He played winning football. And that is enough to help some of these teams jumpstart their rebuilding process. To me, I kind of like Russell where he was in Pittsburgh, but if he has to venture out, if he can bury the hatchet with his former coach, Pete Carroll, why not bring him to Las Vegas and allow him to help this team turn the page and get back to winning quickly. Let's talk about the combine. The combine opened up on Thursday night. The combine opened up with the bigs. I'm a big believer that it's a copycat league. And when you have a copycat league, people are going to look at the teams that had success in the playoffs, and they're going to try and mimic some of the things that they did. The Philadelphia Eagles, the Super Bowl champs, won with a dominant front line, imposing their will on the opponents on both sides of the ball. We have said for years that the Eagles invest in trench warriors and with first and second picks. Those picks, they're able to parlay into productive players, and they were able to do that. When you look at the lineups, particularly on defense, Jalen Carter, Nolan Smith, Jordan Davis, all contributors. Brandon Graham, an old head, running through there. Josh Sweat making plays, who was also an older head, but it was regarded there. All of their things hit when it came to the line of scrimmage. Offensively, they made a move where they got bigger, more physical by bringing Mekhi Becton in and moving them from tackle to guard. You already had a holdover in Lane Johnson. You had Jordan Mayalta, Leonard Dickerson, Cam Jerk. You had all these guys already in place. And what they were able to do is a draft and develop model that has been very, very successful. And when I think about the defense in particular, why wouldn't you want to add more big bodies, more athletic bodies to be able to play that big boy football that has been successful? Looking at the combine, I saw a lot of intriguing athletes that are trench warriors that are ready to go. And none was more impressive than James Pearce, the edge rusher from Tennessee. James Pearce is, really remarkable because when you watched him play at Tennessee, he is a natural. He has great hands, great instincts, a great feel for being able to get after the passer. The thing that he is able to do consistently is first step quickness and burst, finishing skills, whether he uses finesse moves or mixes in a little power that is really a conversion from speed to power as he takes on blockers right down the middle. He has all of those traits that you look for. Size wise, he's a little long and lean, but remember, most of these teams are transitioning to three-man front sub packages, things where you have these guys kind of float as second level hybrids that can do a bunch of different things. To me, James Pearce is a monster coming off the edge. And at the combine, he showed it. Another guy who really helped himself and made some money would be Derek Harmon from Oregon. Big body transfer from Michigan State, really dominated during his time with Dan Lanning. And you can see why a lot of people are excited about him and kind of projecting him as a guy that potentially could be a first round pick, mid first round pick. 6'4, 313, 495, 40, which is ridiculous for a man of that size. But it's the way that he moved around, balance, body control, bend, burst, all of those things that you saw in bag drills and pass rush drills. You love all of that. Super talented. And NFL Network flew a graphic where Next Gen Stats can take the numbers that these guys put up and project them to like a pro comparison. And his pro comp was Chris Jones. Chris Jones, the all-pro defensive end, defensive tackle from the Kansas City Chiefs. When you think about how Chris Jones impacts the game at the line of scrimmage, why wouldn't you want someone who has tools that are comparable? Derek Harmon hasn't been as consistent as Chris Jones was coming out of Mississippi State, but he's a talented player. He's intriguing. The workout suggested that he can develop and do more things in the right environment. Why wouldn't you take a chance on the Oregon standout? Shamar Stewart, Texas A&M D lineman. We knew he was going to be a body beautiful, athletic freak when we saw him. What we didn't know is that he was going to clock a 4.59 40 at 6'5", 267 pounds. He was going vertical 40 inches. He was going broad jump 10 feet 11, and he was going to do it in impressive fashion. He was going to do it while also showing the burst, the body control, the great movement skills, all of those things that you see on tape. The biggest thing with Stewart has been the boom or bust factor that you might have with him, given the fact that his production doesn't match his athletic tools and potential. But what you have is a guy who has registered significant pressures on the quarterback, even though he doesn't have a significant amount of sacks. That makes you believe that right environment, he can develop. Coach's dream, coach takes a chance on him. Very similar to the conversation that I've heard is Trayvon Walker with the Jacksonville Jaguars, a guy who was a talented player, a guy who had all the physical traits and tools that you love, didn't have the production at Georgia. Finds a way to have his production in National Football League, where he has 2 seasons with double-digit sacks, is coming into his own. Maybe not as a dominant rusher like the lead guy, but a high-end complementary player. If Shamar Stewart can develop into that, man, you're more than willing to put up the pick and make him a guy bottom of the first, top of second to come into your team. Now, let me talk about my favorite guy. The favorite guy to watch that I had to watch on Thursday was J.J. Pegues from Ole Miss. Had a chance to watch him throughout the season. He is a big two-way player. As much as we talk about Travis Hunter, Pegues is a two-way player who had 7 offensive touchdowns a season ago, played fullback and defensive tackle. Not the conversation, not the two-way position things that normally go together, but that's where we are. A team like the Baltimore Ravens, who have been very successful putting those bigs at fullback, they would be in love with J.J. Pegues and what he could offer. I'm going to say that I just never seen someone 330 pounds with the wiggle, the nimble feet, the dancing bear ability of this guy. And whether he plays true run-stopping defensive tackle or he does become a steady contributor as a fullback, He's someone you got to watch because he has it when it comes to the movement skills and the athleticism. Last thing, let me send a shout out to my guy, Oklahoma, Danny Stutzman, linebacker, super productive. Not a lot of people thought that he was going to have a great combine and light it up, but he ran a 4.52, and he is one of my favorites to watch on tape because his instinct awareness, it pops. He plays fast. He understands what he's looking at, and he goes, man. He fires his gun. He makes plays and makes it happen. Instincts, awareness, and that. But him running that 4.52 is going to help him, even though he has some limitations in those things in coverage. He's a good one. He helped himself. He is one that I will keep an eye on the rest of the process. We're going to shut it down here now. We just had a little tasty cake of what the combine is. What my plan is on Monday, maybe we'll come back and do a combine wrap-up show where we talk about all the great things that took place over the course of the weekend, talk about the fastest risers, some guys that could be falling. But moreover, we'll talk about how this could impact how teams view free agency, but we'll do that at the beginning of next week. Make sure you rate, review, subscribe to the podcast. Make sure you check out all my colleagues on Believe. Got a great thing going. We're going to do great stuff. And I'm really excited because now this is draft season. We get to talk about prospects each and every time I step to the mic. Doesn't get much better than that. But until next time, I'm Bucky Brooks. This is the Bucky Brooks Show. We'll see you soon.